Okay, my claim again is that liberal secular human rights regime has been a disaster for the human race. Note that in Harris's response, he didn't address any of my questions, so we're going to see if he's going to answer anything in this debate. I'm going to focus on four main examples. Liberal human rights destroys marriage, family, community, and the human race overall. So let's start with marriage. I want to address maybe most of you in the audience directly. Do you know why you are alone? Do you know why you can't get married? Do you know why, if you are married, you are very likely to get divorced? Do you know why there's a very high likelihood that you will die alone? All of this is because the liberal human rights regime is destroying marriage. The fact of the matter is, marriage is deeply rooted in natural human instincts. We crave romantic affection. We want to give and receive love with a long-term committed partner who we have children with. Psychologists and neurobiologists call this pair bonding. Pair bonding is this instinct to bond with the opposite sex in a long-term relationship. Most animal species don't have this pair bonding instinct, but 3% of animals do have pair bonding, like most birds, certain primates, and also human beings. Being in long-term, committed, married relationships is associated with countless benefits in terms of health and happiness. The Washington Post reported that studies prove that married people have happier, healthier relationships than unmarried couples who simply live together. But human rights has destroyed marriage, and it's easy to understand why. If you're constantly prioritizing individual liberty, individual happiness, then that conflicts with the long-term sacrifice and commitment that marriage requires. Stable marriages require you to give up your individual autonomy in many significant ways, and liberalized people are not interested in that, and the stats prove it. Nowadays, most people are not getting married. According to Pew, 65% of millennials between the ages of 23 and 38 were unmarried in 2019. Pew predicts that in a few short years, 75% of millennials will never be married. This will be an all-time low according to Pew. Now you might think maybe people are not getting married, but they're still having long-term unmarried relationships. Not true. According to the Washington Post and the General Social Survey, the share of US adults reporting no sex in the past year reached an all-time high in 2018, underscoring a 3-decade trend. About 1 in 4 adults did not have sex the whole year, and the numbers continue to increase every year in what experts call sex recession. In some countries like Denmark and Spain, governments have to literally beg their population to have sex. Now, if you're in the minority who does get married, then the likelihood that your marriage will end in divorce is very high if you live in liberal democracies. In the US, about 44% of marriages end in divorce. In France, 51%. In the UK, 42%. These stats don't even factor in long-term separation between couples. If we counted that, the rates would be even higher. The likelihood your spouse will cheat on you is also very high in free liberal countries. Some studies have found that the infidelity rate is as high as 26% in some Western countries. Those people who do get married are also going to have lower quality marriages. Studies show that having multiple sex partners prior to marriage reduces marital quality. People are less satisfied with their spouse when they have been around the block a few times, literally. By the time people do get married in the West in their 30s or 40s, they have had so many failed past relationships that they're often emotionally damaged. The person you're marrying comes with all this baggage in addition to your own baggage. So the overall marital quality suffers. But Muslims, because of Islam and Sharia, are on the...
All right, let me just comment on this because I think some people who might not be aware of the statistics, especially Muslims, they could be confused by this. Because we have this notion of the West as being sexually liberated. So that must mean there's so much sex and everyone is just basically getting things on like donkeys, basically, and cats and dogs. That's actually not exactly true. Some people are living like donkeys and engaging in all of this fornication. Some people, but it's the minority. There's actually a lot of evidence that I just cited in this that shows that a lot of people are not actually able to find someone to have these kinds of romantic relationships with, premarital relationships with. People are becoming more and more sexless. Obviously, I'm not advocating for fornication or premarital sex or anything like that, but it's showing that this individualism of liberal human rights, this whole intellectual tradition of individualism and liberal human rights, it makes people individuals by themselves. Because any kind of relationship that you have is going to limit your personal freedom. And non-Muslims who are watching the debate or they're watching this live stream, I think they can reflect and then they'll know what I'm talking about. That any kind of relationship that you're in requires you to be considerate of the other person, requires you to help the other person, requires you to put aside what you want some of the time and prioritize what he or she wants some of the time. And this contradicts individualism. This contradicts your personal happiness or maximizing your pleasure in the moment, right? So then it's easier, forget about this relationship. I'm tired. Forget about trying to find a boyfriend, a girlfriend. Forget about dating, what they call fornication, basically. Forget about all of this stuff. Let's just stay at home and self-pleasure ourselves. And that's just easier. It's just easier. Maybe in the future, with technology like virtual reality and or sex robots. Yeah, sex robot. And this is, again, the nature of technology, which I mentioned later. And liberalism is that just have a technology that gives you the pleasure of sexual relations and sexual release, but it doesn't come with any responsibilities or any duties to another person. It doesn't come with these deontological duties and responsibilities and morality. You just do it with a robot. You just do it with like a masturbation machine, with virtual reality. This is progress. This is amazing because you've actually increased people's pleasure without corresponding duties, without corresponding rights that you have to respect. And this is like a deeper philosophical point which we couldn't have gotten into in the debate, but there's always a give and take with rights and responsibilities. Every right that you grant someone comes with corresponding duties. And I teach this in Alesna and my courses on liberalism. But every right has a corresponding duty. But duties are bad. Why? Because duties require you to do something that you don't want to do. Duties are hard. Sometimes they require you to put aside your personal pleasures. So you want to increase people's rights, but you don't want to increase their duties. How do you do that? Well, you create these technologies. You create these amazing new technologies that will... there's no more duties. You can just sit in your pod and relax as an individual, and everything that you need is given to you through drugs, through technology, through virtual reality, through whatever, to get you that dopamine that you need to be happy and to experience pleasure. That is how liberalism and technology work together to create, and this is the future that we're going down, and when we see the path of that. What suffers are these organic relationships. What suffers are these human relationships, because all of these human relationships, like the extended family which has been destroyed, the nuclear family which has been destroyed, marriage which is being destroyed, even unmarried premarital relations, which are also relations, all of these things are being destroyed because they require duties, they require sacrifice. Just create technology to get rid of the hard part, the part that we don't want, and just maximize pleasure. But the problem here, and I refer to this in the debate, is that the technology has its own costs. The technology is destroying the human race. The technology is creating this dystopia. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. You know, as the philosopher/terrorist Ted Kaczynski wrote in his manifesto. So these are, and other philosophers, it's not just Ted Kaczynski, other French philosophers, German philosophers have written about the impact of technology combined with liberalism and individualism. It's going to destroy the human race. And we see this very clearly with the things that Harris himself proposes, because we'll see later in the debate, he proposes AI, he proposes like this kind of immortality. We'll one day discover immortality, so why have babies? So he doesn't recognize how horrifying that sounds to normal people.
the opposite end of all this. Yes, modernity is affecting Muslims, unfortunately, but we're on the opposite end in terms of these stats. Numerous ethnographic studies of Muslim countries prove this. Muslims get married more, they get married younger, they have far lower levels of premarital and extramarital sex, they have lower divorce rates, and due to all of this, they have higher quality marriages, love, and romance. This is because of the rules in Islamic law that specify gender separation, hijab, and modesty, restrictions on fornication and adultery, patriarchy and gender roles, family involvement in marriage, and so forth. These are rules the liberal human rights regime considers backwards and misogynistic, but these are the same exact rules that save Muslim marriages from the destruction that Western society is suffering from. So Haris can give this abstract discussion of objective good versus evil, but marriage and love is something that humans all value. And I'm citing stats, I'm citing studies that everyone can agree with and everyone feels viscerally because that's human nature.
Okay. Everyone understand that, like, Islam is saying that no, your personal happiness or personal pleasure is not the only important thing. There's these other values, like the value of caring for someone as a spouse romantically, in a marriage, in a halal marriage before God, and reproducing, continuing the human race, giving birth to more Muslims, so that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be proud of his ummah, the size of his ummah, larger than any other ummah, any other peoples on Yawm al-Qiyamah, on the Day of Judgment. This is what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said. Do you want to make the Prophet proud? Do you want to make the Prophet happy? Of course, we love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than we love ourselves. So if you want anything that I can do to make the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam happy, I want to do that. And he's telling me what is going to make him proud and make him happy. So this is a huge encouragement for Muslims to have more children and to take care of more children. It's more responsibility. It's more burden. Anyone who has children knows it's not a walk in the park. You have to sacrifice many of the things that you want to do, your career, your goals, your ambitions for whatever, whether it's corporate related, education related, whatever the modern capitalist world tells us we need to have. You have to sacrifice that for having children. But Muslims do it because it's such a high value. What was the point that I wanted to make with that? Yeah, so you have to sacrifice your personal dreams and ambitions for those children, but you also gain a lot of benefit from children as well. Yeah, it's not a walk in the park, but you love your children. You feel emotions by having children that you will never experience if you remain childless in your life. So, I mean, it's sad. I'm not trying to dump on people who can't have children because for whatever biological reason or whatever reason, some people can't have children. And may Allah grant everyone the joy and the love to experience of having children. If you can't, then we make dua for you. But I do blame those who are not having children because of selfish reasons, selfish desires. No, I don't want to have children because it's a burden. No, I don't want to have children because it's, a responsibility. This is just a delusion. You're missing out on a major experience, a major human experience that all people value. Not just Muslims, all people value it. Islam just values it in a very specific and beautiful way and creates the system that is most conducive to raising strong, amazing Muslim children. So that beauty is lost if you have this kind of individualistic mindset that the modern world promotes. And this is, I forgot to mention that at the beginning of this marriage section, I said specifically, I'm talking to the audience directly. Meaning I'm talking to Muslims and non-Muslims. You need to appreciate the value of marriage and romance and love with the opposite sex in pair bonding relationships. This is a value that all humans recognize universally. If we want to talk about objectivity, there are a few things that are as objective in the sense of as strongly, viscerally experienced by the human consciousness as love with the opposite sex. This is how we've been created. So reflect on your love life. I'm not advocating fornication, But just reflect. Don't you want to have someone to love and to hold? Your soulmate. Soulmate, is, we don't have the same exact concept of soulmate. We do have some notion of soulmate. It's a separate topic. But the idea of having someone that you deeply love, that is universal. And Islam inculcates that through marriage. By banning premarital sex, just by that, and having a very strict punishment for it. If you get caught, 4 upright male witnesses see the penetrative act of premarital sex, zina, there are very severe consequences. So you're going to, of lashing. So you're going to avoid that. You're going to avoid that behavior, and you're going to get married, lawful marriage, in a committed relationship. So that policy in and of itself prevents this individualistic malaise of the modern free West, where you have a certain segment of society who are monopolizing sex with their clubbing and their sex work and their Tinder-fueled garbage. That's a minority. And then you have a lot of people who are sexless, and they're deluded to thinking that they want to be players and whatever, and queens, and following in that hedonistic lifestyle. But they're not having sex themselves. They're just at home by themselves. So this is like a dystopia it's like a horror show. It's a literal horror show. Let me